So in today's video, we're going to continue to look at what's going to happen if the US tries to form an empire in 2024. And in the last video, we saw that the US invaded many countries to form an empire. They invaded Canada and took all of this. They invaded Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela, Egypt, Djibouti, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia. So that video got a lot of support from you guys. So I decided to make a part 2 about that video. But in today's video, they're going to be doing something different. And the US plan today is way different than it was before. And in the previous video, they invaded all these countries to have some strategic locations around the world. Like they invaded Egypt only for Suez Canal. They invaded Djibouti because it controls the entrance to the Red Sea. And they invaded Sri Lanka and Malaysia in order to contain China. But in today's video, the US is gonna go full expansion mode. And they're gonna completely occupy the countries which they invade. And the second thing is, they're only gonna be invading the English-speaking countries. And that is just because they don't want to face some rebellions. And mostly all of the English-speaking countries have the same kind of culture. It's surely not completely the same, but we can assume that the US won't have to face any rebellions in the future. But enough talking and let's get into the wars. And the first country which they want to invade is South Africa. And as I told you, they're going to be focusing on the English-speaking countries. We can see a naval landing on the west coast of South Africa, and thus the US has now taken the capital city of South Africa. But South Africa doesn't have one capital city, they have two more. We can see another landing on the east coast of South Africa, and these troops ultimately meet up with the main army, and all of the coastline from South Africa is taken. And now the US is accelerating their push into South Africa. But ultimately we can see that South Africa goes ahead and surrenders. And in a peace treaty we can see that all of South Africa got completely annexed by the US. Now they were done in South Africa and they have more and more countries to invade. So the next country which the US wants to invade is Australia. And I know that in real life they would never go ahead and attack Australia, but just for the sake of this video, we are assuming that the US is now at war with Australia. The troops from South Africa have now landed on the west coast of Australia, and all the major cities on the west coast have now been taken. But all of this region of Australia is purely a desert, so the US will have a hard time crossing the desert. But we can see that the US troops are following the coastline of Australia. But at the same time, we can see another landing on the east coast of Australia, and this one goes surprisingly well for the US, as now they have occupied all of the major cities, and the capital city of Australia is also now taken. Tasmania is also taken, and these troops ultimately meet up with each other, and after some decisive military campaigns and a lot of casualties on both sides, there is nothing much left in Australia, so they just go ahead and surrender. And yeah, once again in the peace treaty we can see that Australia got completely annexed by the US, and that's just because they went full expansion mode today. So yeah, anyways, the next country which the US wants to invade is New Zealand, and the same troops from Australia have now arrived in New Zealand. The capital city of New Zealand, Wellington, is also now taken, and slowly but surely most of New Zealand is taken and the rest of the country just surrenders. And in a peace treaty we can see that all of New Zealand got completely annexed by the United States of America. But yeah, so far they are doing pretty well. They invaded Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, but they have some more countries to invade, and they're going to be invading multiple countries at the same time because they have expanded their military too. They're going to be declaring war on Panama, the remaining parts of Canada, and Kenya. Now the US previously invaded Canada, and the US took all of the major parts of Canada, but now they've decided to take the entirety of Canada. This one's gonna be a pretty easy invasion for the United States of America. They push in from all sides, and their new capital city is also taken. But yeah, the remaining part of Canada was not strong at all. The US now goes full beast mode, and after some decisive military campaigns, we can see that most of Canada is now taken, and the remaining parts of the country just go ahead and surrender. And for Panama, we can see a naval landing on the west coast, and the country eventually falls. And in Kenya, we can see that the US Navy has now arrived, and they eventually take all of the Kenyan coastline. But Kenya is also a pretty weak country, and after 6 months or so, Kenya also finally goes ahead and surrenders. And in this peace treaty, we can see that all of Canada got completely annexed by the United States. Same happened to Panama as well as Kenya. And yeah, so far this is what the US empire looks like right now. And so far we can see that they invaded most of the English-speaking countries. And yeah, now they don't have to worry about any sort of rebellion in the future. But now they only have 2 more countries to invade. And those 2 countries are Nigeria and Liberia. Now they're invading Nigeria because Nigeria has a lot of population, and that population could benefit the US a lot. And they're invading Liberia because Liberia just try to copy their flag. Only because of the flag, the US is now at war with Liberia. Anyways, Liberia doesn't exist, and we can see a naval landing on the coast of Nigeria, and eventually the US military has taken the Nigerian coast. But this was probably the hardest invasion for the US, as Nigeria is a pretty strong country. We can see that the Nigerian capital has been taken, but Nigeria still does not surrender. But after many more years of fighting and many casualties on both sides, we can see that the US has now taken all of Nigeria, and the rest of the military just goes ahead and surrenders. And would you look at that, this is the United States of America forming an empire in 2024, and it probably took them 150 years or so to gain all of this land. And this is gonna be it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you guys want to see in the future. So yeah, anyways, thank you for watching.